Picture this. The sun is just starting to dip below the tree line, casting this golden, cinematic hour glow over everything. And I'm standing there, hands raw and blistered, smelling of fresh cedar and honest sweat, looking at what I'd just built with my own two hands. It was a bridge, not just some slapdash collection of wood, but a sturdy, beautiful, 12-foot span across the creek that runs through the back of my 2-acre slice of paradise, a literal bridge to freedom for my kids, Sophie and Lucas, so they could finally reach the massive oak tree on the other side without slipping on mossy rocks or wading through mud. I was beaming, feeling that primal dad pride, the kind that makes you forget your back hurts, listening to the birds chirping like they were applauding the effort, until that sound. The specific, soul-crushing sound of expensive rubber crunching on gravel shattered the peace. A pristine, obsidian-black luxury SUV, worth more than the GDP of a small island nation, rolls up my driveway, and out steps Karen Sterling, the self-appointed queen of Oakhaven Heights, clutching a clipboard like it's the nuclear codes, wearing designer athleisure that costs more than my entire tool collection, and she's got this smile, this terrifying, tight-lipped smile that doesn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile a shark gives a seal before lunch. She doesn't say hello, doesn't ask how I am, just marches across the lawn with military precision, her heels sinking slightly into the grass I haven't mowed yet, and slaps me with a fine, a $350 ticket for unauthorized improvements, tapping her manicured nail on the paper like she's keeping time to my impending doom. I'm Mason Cole, just a guy trying to rebuild his life, a 45-year-old electrician whose hands are stained with grease and hard work, trying to make a home for his kids after a brutal divorce that left me feeling like a hollow shell. And here stands this woman, this embodiment of suburban tyranny, telling me I can't build a safe path for my children on the land I pay a mortgage for. She looked at me like I was the help, like I was a stain on her perfect neighborhood. But she didn't know who she was messing with. She didn't realize that when you push a man who has nothing left to lose but his dignity, you're not starting a conversation, you're starting a war. Let's rewind the tape for a second so you understand the stakes here. 6 months ago, I was living in a depressing one-bedroom apartment, recovering from a 15-year marriage that imploded, leaving me with joint custody and a desperate need to reconnect with Sophie, who's 12 and glued to her phone, and Lucas, who's 9 and just wants his dad back. I found this place in Oakhaven Heights, a fixer-upper that scared off the regular buyers. But I saw the potential. I saw the creek, the woods, the silence. I saw a place where an electrician could work with his hands and heal his heart, away from the corporate pretension my ex-wife loved so much. The creek was the selling point, but it was also a hazard. Getting across it was a nightmare. So I spent 3 weekends, blew $800 on premium cedar, galvanized bolts, and concrete footings, pouring my frustration and my love into every screw I drove, treating that bridge like therapy. And when it was done, when Lucas ran across it screaming that it was the bridge to Terabithia, and Sophie actually looked up from TikTok to smile, I felt like I had finally won something. Enter Karen Sterling, 50-something, married to Dr. Arthur Sterling, a man so beaten down by her that he has mastered the art of becoming invisible in his own driveway. A woman who has been the HOA president for 6 years, ruling Oakhaven Heights like it's her personal kingdom in Game of Thrones. She drives around at exactly 25 miles per hour, scanning for infractions like a Terminator, measuring grass height with a ruler. I'm not joking, an actual ruler, and writing up violations for mailboxes that are the wrong shade of beige, targeting anyone who doesn't fit her country club aesthetic, specifically single moms, the elderly, and blue-collar guys like me who drive trucks instead of Teslas. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she chirps, pronouncing my name like it's a dirty word. "I trust you're settling in." But the way she says it sounds like, "I hope you're leaving soon." And then she drops the hammer, telling me the structure is non-compliant, that aesthetic modifications require board approval, that I'm bringing down property values. And while she's lecturing me, I see Mrs. Higgins, the retired librarian from 3 doors down, walking her pug and lingering by the mailbox, listening intently because she knows exactly what kind of monster Karen is. I try to be reasonable. I told her it's on my property, it's for safety, but Karen just smiled that icy smile and handed me the violation notice. $350 initial fine, $50 daily penalty until removal, demands that made my blood boil. demands that meant tearing down my hard work and disappointing my kids. But before I could lose my temper, Mrs. Higgins shouts over, "Lovely bridge, Mason." Reminds me of the ones my late husband built for the state parks. A compliment that hit Karen like a physical slap because Mrs. Higgins was challenging her authority right there in the open. Karen stuttered, tried to dismiss her, but Mrs. Higgins just smiled and mentioned Karen's own gazebo that mysteriously appeared without approval years ago, a subtle jab that froze the air between them, proving that this wasn't about rules, it was about power. Karen retreated to her SUV, rattling off threats about legal action and liens, leaving me standing there in the exhaust fumes, realizing that this wasn't just about a bridge, it was about a bully trying to mark her territory, trying to tell the electrician to know his place. But she made a critical error in judgment, because while she was busy picking out paint swatches, I spent my career reading blueprints and safety codes, and I know that the devil is always in the details. Monday morning, I'm in the garage, angry cleaning my tools, when a city truck pulls up, and out hops Inspector Miller, a guy with a face like worn leather and a hard hat that's seen real work, looking confused because someone reported an unsafe, unpermitted structure on my lot. I invite him back, confident because I don't cut corners, and as he's inspecting the footings, Karen appears again, magically, wearing a different shade of pastel yoga pants, acting all concerned for public safety, trying to direct the professional inspector like she's his boss. But Miller isn't having it. He looks at the bridge, looks at the concrete work, shakes the railings, and actually laughs, telling Karen, "Ma'am, this is built better than most of the decks in this zip code," explaining that for a private bridge of this span, no permit is needed, that it falls under homeowner rights, and watching Karen's face crumble, watching her grasp for straws about HOA compliance, while the city official tells her that HOA rules don't trump county law or property rights, was the sweetest nectar I had tasted in years. Miller even shook my hand, gave me his card, and told me, "Nice work, son," leaving Karen standing there, humiliated, stripped of her weapon. But I could see in her eyes that this wasn't over, that I had just embarrassed the queen in front of her subjects, and she was going to burn my world down for it. You'd think being humiliated by a city official would make a normal person back off, but Karen Sterling operates on a level of pettiness that defies physics, so instead of retreating, she took the war digital. I'm helping Lucas with his math homework on Tuesday night when my phone starts buzzing like it's having a seizure, notifications from Facebook, Nextdoor, even Instagram. And I open it to find that I am the star of a new page called Save Oakhaven Standards, where Karen has posted photos of my bridge with captions like "unauthorized construction endangering our kids" and "property value killer." My ex-wife, Jessica, calls me in a panic, asking why I'm building death traps, and I have to talk her down while scrolling through comments from people I've never met calling me a redneck vandal. But then, the tide shifts, because Carlos Mendez, the landscaper down the street, comments, "I've seen it, it's solid," and Mrs. Higgins chimes in with, "Beautiful craftsmanship," and suddenly, the comment section turns into a battlefield where Karen is losing control of the narrative. But she wasn't done, not by a long shot, because on Wednesday, a silver sedan pulls up and out steps attorney Philip Sterling, Karen's brother-in-law, a guy who looks like he's allergic to fresh air, tugging at a tie that's too tight, clearly dragged here by family obligation to deliver a cease and desist. He starts reading from a script about liens and foreclosure, sweating profusely, but I've worked enough commercial jobs to know how to handle suits. So I asked him one simple question. "Have you verified the HOA's current legal standing with the state?" He froze, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal, stammering about assumptions and paperwork, and that's when I knew I had found the crack in the armor because I had spent the previous night on the Secretary of State's website, a resource that is free and public, but no one ever checks. I pulled out my phone right there in the driveway, with Philip and Karen watching, and put the state business registration clerk on speakerphone, asking for the status of the Oakhaven Guardians HOA. The voice on the other end was crystal clear, cutting through the suburban quiet like a knife. "Sir, that corporation was administratively dissolved 18 months ago for failure to file annual reports and pay fees, meaning the HOA was a ghost, a zombie entity with zero legal authority to fine anyone, sue anyone, or even exist." Karen went pale. Philip looked like he was going to vomit, and they scrambled into their car, arguing violently as they peeled away, but the implications hit me harder than the victory. If the HOA didn't exist, where was the money going? I texted Mrs. Higgins, and an hour later, I'm in her living room, eating snickerdoodles and looking at a dossier that would make the FBI jealous, realizing this sweet old lady has been tracking Karen's reign of terror for years. She lays out the evidence: photocopied checks, violation notices, and a handwritten ledger showing that Karen had fined 14 households in the last year. Carlos for planting wrong flowers, single mom Sarah for a trampoline, the elderly Mr. Henderson for a bird feeder, totaling over $12,000. And the bank records Mrs. Higgins' late husband had access to showed the money wasn't going into a community fund. It was going into a personal account named Oak Haven Management, controlled solely by Karen. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was grand larceny. This was a Ponzi scheme built on yoga pants and intimidation. And as the rage washed over me, realizing she had stolen from struggling families to fund her lifestyle, I knew we had to go nuclear. We organized a secret war room meeting at my place that Thursday, inviting every victim Mrs. Higgins had identified, and the room was thick with tension and the smell of cheap coffee as I laid out the truth, showing Carlos, Sarah, and the others that they had been robbed by the woman waving at them from her Mercedes. The plan was set: simultaneous complaints to the Attorney General, the Better Business Bureau, and the Police Fraud Division. But Karen, sensing the walls closing in, made the mistake that ended her. Friday afternoon, my boss Mike calls me, confused, saying a woman called the company claiming I was unstable and a liability, trying to get me fired. And then, the kill shot. CPS knocks on my door on Sunday morning. Detective Vance from Child Protective Services stands on my porch, apologetic but serious, saying they received a report about unsafe living conditions and neglect, specifically citing the bridge and my erratic behavior. And looking across the street, I see Karen's curtains twitching. She had weaponized the state against my children. She had tried to take Sophie and Lucas away from me because I wouldn't pay her $350. And in that moment, standing in my doorway while my kids ate pancakes, oblivious to the fact that their father was about to tear the world apart to protect them, I decided that simple justice wasn't enough. I needed to destroy her entire empire. I passed the inspection with flying colors, obviously, because I'm a good dad, but the detective tipped me off that this anonymous caller had a history of making nuisance reports, giving me the final piece of ammo I needed. I sent out a blast text to the neighborhood group, not revealing what I knew, simply saying, HOA transparency meeting, Tuesday night, community center, be there. Karen, thinking she could spin this, hijacked the thread, declaring it an emergency safety meeting to discuss my dangerous illegal structure, unwittingly inviting the entire neighborhood to her own execution. The atmosphere in the community center on Tuesday night was electric, heavy with the scent of floor wax and impending doom. The room packed wall to wall with neighbors who usually avoided these meetings like the plague, but tonight, everyone sensed blood in the water. Karen Sterling sat at the front table, flanked by her sweating brother-in-law Philip, looking every bit the martyr in a navy blazer, projecting a distorted, photoshopped image of my bridge on the screen behind her that added jagged edges and ominous red warning signs, trying to sell the lie one last time. She banged her gavel, silencing the murmurs, and launched into a rehearsed speech about rogue elements and preserving our investment, her voice trembling slightly, desperate to regain control. But the moment she opened the floor for comments, I stood up, not with anger, but with the cold, hard calm of a man holding a royal flush. I walked to the front, briefcase in hand, and asked, before we discuss the bridge, Karen, can we discuss the bank account? You could hear a pin drop. The silence was absolute, sucking the air out of the room as I projected the Secretary of State's document onto the wall next to her fake photo, showing the dissolved status in big, bold letters. Karen, this HOA has been legally dead for 18 months, I said, my voice echoing off the cheap acoustic tiles, which means every fine you've collected, every threat you've made, has been fraud. She tried to shout over me, screaming about technicalities, but then Mrs. Higgins stood up, bless her heart, and started reading the list of victims and the dollar amounts. $400 from Sarah for a trampoline, $800 from Carlos for wildflowers, and with every name, the room grew hotter, the crowd turning from confused neighbors into an angry mob. Then, the doors at the back swung open, and reporter Emily Vance from Channel 4 walked in with a cameraman, the bright LED light illuminating Karen's face like a deer in the headlights, capturing the exact moment her soul left her body. "Mrs. Sterling," the reporter asked, shoving a microphone toward the table, "we have records showing $12,000 transferred to your personal account. Would you like to comment on the pending Attorney General investigation?" Karen stammered, looking for Philip, but her lawyer was already packing his briefcase, literally physically distancing himself from her as the questions rained down. And then, the finale, the cherry on top of this Justice Sunday, Sheriff's Deputy Miller, no relation to the inspector, just poetic justice, stepped forward from the back of the room, not to arrest her on the spot, but to serve her with a stack of papers thick enough to choke a horse, civil suits from 14 families, and a notification of the criminal fraud investigation. Karen slumped in her chair, the Queen of Oakhaven reduced to a trembling fraud in designer shoes, as the room erupted in applause, actual applause, because the tyrant had finally fallen. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Karen resigned the next morning and put her house on the market by the weekend, eventually moving to a condo 2 towns over where a management company watches her like a hawk. Philip settled out of court to save his law license. And Dr. Sterling? The man looks 10 years younger. Neighbors say they've actually seen him whistling while getting the mail. We held new elections, voting Mrs. Higgins in as the new president with strict term limits and total financial transparency. And we used the recovered funds. Yes, Karen had to pay back every cent plus damages to avoid jail time, to start a community scholarship and a beautification fund. As for me, I'm sitting on my bridge right now, watching the autumn leaves float down the creek, listening to Sophie and Lucas laughing with the neighbor kids who now use this illegal structure as their favorite hangout spot. I didn't want a war, I just wanted to build a bridge, but sometimes you have to burn a bully's kingdom to the ground to protect your own castle. It feels good, the justice, the peace, the quiet, but it makes you wonder, doesn't it? At what point does enforcing standards cross the line into destroying lives? Was I right to humiliate her so publicly, or should I have handled it quietly? I know my answer, but I want to know yours. When does a rule become a weapon? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to go to war with a neighbor, and don't forget to hit that like button if you believe a man's home is his castle. Stay safe, stay free, and read the fine print.